So, not sure if you've heard about Slave Play before. It's a play by Jeremy O. Harris. It won a Tony Award. It's considered one of the most controversial plays of the last decade or so. It's a satire on race, slavery, and interracial relationships. And basically, everywhere it goes, it starts debates about among fans and critics alike. And now it's playing in Toronto. So we are going to talk about it and try to figure out who Slave Play is really for. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Jones is here. Matt Amha is here. They have both seen the Toronto production of Slave Play. Hello, both of you.
Hello.
Hi, it's nice to have you here. Listen, I'm going to get into all of everything to do with Slave Play, but maybe we'll just set it up a little bit, Matt. Slave Play centers on 3 black-white interracial couples. They're participating in one collective therapy session, except it requires them to do a little bit of role-playing. Specifically, it requires them to take on sex roles rooted in the master-slave dynamic and plantations in the antebellum South era. And that's basically the basic premise here. What else should people know about the premise of Slave Play before we get into the conversation? Oh, Matt, I can't quite hear you.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. You're back.
Yeah, I think that what people should be prepared for is to witness white racial terror violence in its rawest and most brutal form. Like, you need to be prepared for that. People should be prepared to imagine a world in which Black people require racial terror to be visited upon them in order to reach orgasm. Like that is like the kind of core plot device here. And I found the whole thing to be the most like incendiary, vile thing I have watched in my life. I need to be honest about that. I think we'll talk a little bit more about why that is, but that to me was the kind of base function of the story.
I gotta tell you, I don't think that I can remember the last time I came out of a play and used words like incendiary and vile. Those are very strong reactions and strong words. Over to you, pal. Going into this play, what were some of the themes that you were interested in, wanted to see explored?
Well, don't hold back, Matt. I obviously knew what the commentary was beforehand. This play is relatively old. I mean, it debuted, I think, on Broadway in 2018.
Yeah.
So I wasn't, unaware of the discourse around it. With that said, you tried to give things a chance. I was interested in how it might translate over the border, for example, and whether there would be anything done to, maybe adjust the play over time and space and like how that was going to play. I don't know. I mean, we're in light of Kendrick Lamar's, Not Like Us. Like, we've had a whole conversation through that song about what is truly Black identity. Are Black Canadians really Black? Are we like them? What about biracial people? So I supposed it might, be part of that conversation in some way. And I was also, I guess, interested in how the audience would receive it, which, as Matt said, is like the real experience that you have watching this play in a majority white audience. So, I was obviously aware that Black critics had been very harsh for obvious reasons. And then I suppose, you try not to go in expecting whatever. But like Matt, I can't say less than it was like a kind of repulsive experience.
Yeah, repulsive, vile, incendiary. Those are the words that you guys are using right now. I think like there's something about this play that sort of takes people to these reactions, right? It takes people to these specific emotions. It has been a polarizing play basically since it launched. What was the audience reaction like to the show that you attended, Matt?
I mean,
okay,
it's like where to begin, right? I think the most insidious part of my viewing experience was the laughter in the theater.
Yes.
Like I swear to God, I will never forget the laughter in that theater. I probably spent as much time focused on the actors as I did the audience. Like I walked in and I counted 6 people in that theater, 6 Black people, sorry, 2 of whom were with their white partners. I watched this white liberal room sit at rapt attention as a Black woman was subject to rape and racial violence, as she was called the N-word over and over and over again. I watched a Black woman twerk to Rihanna for her slave master and watch her eat food off the ground like a dog as, the white people around me howled with laughter, and like I watched them laugh at words like jigaboo and quadroon, like early colonial era white supremacist language, words I'm sure they've never heard before, but in that moment they found hilarious, and like the whole thing to me was like the actors were reflecting a mirror back onto the white liberal audience it felt like it was a play designed for them. Like this was a message designed for them, and it felt like I, as a young black man, was intruding on something that was not designed with me in mind. Like I was there trespassing on their conversation and on their entertainment. And like the awkward looks that I would get from people in the theater when they realized my presence, it was like my being there was literally spoiling their fun. You know, like they were getting some catharsis from witnessing this racial violence. And I could barely watch. I watched probably 50% of it through my fingers because it was so difficult to see, So, yeah, I mean, it was a play designed with a white liberal audience in mind. And I think in that way, it probably met its mandate. They stood up at the end and gave it a standing ovation.
The thing that you're describing there, the idea that your reaction is going to be different from most of the room as they were responding to that, that's interesting to me because what that raises is the question of who that play was designed for. And I want to come back to that in just a moment because there's something to be said also about the performances that bring out that reaction, that really stark reaction. So let's talk about the performances in this Toronto production. Elle, any characters stood out for you as you were watching this play?
I think the thing you also have to understand about this play is beyond black-white relations, it's also a play deeply obsessed with colorism in a bad way. So not in a way that actually, in a generative way, like has this conversation that, is very important in the Black community around shade. So the darker skinned Black characters are also the most hysterical and angry characters in the play. So do nothing to kind of dismantle the idea. Do you remember how Mad TV used to have Black Masterpiece Theater? Do you remember this sketch from a long time ago?
Yeah.
Okay, just like that was actually like, imagine that satire, but like not even as funny as Mad TV, like not even as well done as Mad TV was doing it, but like that's the mode of the play. Now that is not the actors' fault. The actors are excellent and they're giving it their all and they're trying to work with this material. And if you've ever watched the documentary on this play, you'll see that the way that this play is workshopped is also like in this extremely like, we're going to use like all these N words like hard ER in the play, but then be precious about saying it when we're working on it. So this is it's like the meme men would rather write a whole play than go to therapy. Like that's this play, like just go to therapy. Like, but so the actors are dealing with this material that's violent, that is, as Matt has, I think, very well laid out, like very much directed towards a white audience. They didn't just laugh at slavery. They laughed at things like recounting of racial trauma in the showers when people are commenting on your genitalia in like the contemporary world. And that was really funny to them, like a mixed race man facing like sexual harassment in the showers. They laughed at like a Black woman, like rape, and it's just, that's what you're experiencing. And that said, the actors are doing their best. I think they're really trying. They're really trying to find nuance in the material. I mean, Sophia Walker, who's an excellent actress, who's very underrated, has not, I don't think, got her flowers in Canadian theater as much as she should. She does what she can with this central Black character of Kenesha, this Black woman. But what do you do with the character of a Black woman who wants to be called a dirty negress and like have her consent violated? And the other thing I want to say before we move on is that I think the most insidious thing about the play is all the critiques are placed into the mouth of the white man who we despise.
I was about to say this. This is the most, my God.
This is the most insidious thing.
Go in, get in there.
The person that says, this is insane, I can't believe we're doing this, this is ridiculous. The person who, by the way, actually respects consent and used a safe word and then gets like shamed by the other characters and his partner for not sexually desiring the activities that she does. So now you have a Black woman framed as the person who's actually violating the consent of a white man that was somehow not supposed to notice in the play. But like all that critique comes out of his mouth. So his desire to remove himself from the space, his critique. So it's like this dodge where if you have any critique of this play and its performances and what it's doing, you're like the white man. So the people who get it must be the people who are laughing and the people who are present in the space and the people who are willing to go with this. So this is like very insidious because if you object to this, you're basically the white man that's refusing to play alone.
First of all, I appreciate that both of you had sort of that sort of intense reaction. But then the other thing that there is here about this play is that it's a matter of who this play is working for and who this play is, sort of maybe supposed to make somebody think differently about the reaction that they're supposed to be having. So what I want to play you guys is a clip right now. And it's a clip from Jordan Lafreniere, who's a director of this Toronto production of Slave Play. Jordan himself is Black and Canadian. And this is a clip of him talking on Here and Now on CBC, talking about the concerns that he initially had about Slave Play, particularly the first act. Listen to this.
I was super offended when I saw the first act. I have slave ancestors on both sides of my family, and so slavery was constantly a part of the conversation when I was a child. And so, I was reading historical slave books from a super, super young age, and so seeing a depiction of slavery that didn't feel true or rooted, I felt really harmful. And then the second act happened, and I was completely transformed.
So that's Jordan Lafreniere. He's the director of the Toronto production of Slave Play, and I should say that this production of Slave Play in Toronto gotten mostly positive reviews. Matt, it's worth noting that most of those critics are not Black, and that's a really significant thing to point out here. There is something to be said about who this play is for. Is it meant to be making fun of the audience who's having such a good time? Or is it meant to be sort of saying, you are meant to be having this great of a time, and they are, in fact, playing directly into it? Who do you think Slave Play is for?
Slave Play was for the white liberal audience that we've been talking about. It was written for this is the audience that Robin DiAngelo was writing White Fragility for. This is the audience that Dr. King is critiquing in his letter from a Birmingham jail. That is what this is. But in looking for meaning, looking deeply for meaning while and after watching this, this seemed to me to be about the playwright's own personal struggle, about wanting to be centered and desired by whiteness to the extent that you are willing to allow all variety of violations on your life, on your Black body, what it means to effectively declare war on your Black body in pursuit of white desire. I don't know, Jeremy O'Harris's entire story, but no. He seems to me to be the kind of person that is struggling deeply around desirability in the eyes of white men, and that he basically extrapolated his own psychosexual angst and mapped it onto American history and mapped it onto other Black lives in a way that I'm just not sure makes much sense. I think, to Elle's point, the voice of reason in the play is the heterosexual white man. He is the only one that expresses apprehensions about the notion that one might be able to liberate themselves through recreating plantation violence. I found that stunning, truly stunning. Some of the questions that you have in your mind as a Black person watching are being rearticulated back to you only by the white male character on that stage, right? And I think that's
a disquieting experience.
Yeah, completely, right? And there's a kind of work in cinema that I kind of refer to as racial terror cinema. It's the kind of film that depicts the antebellum plantation period with a certain gratuitousness and a certain lewdness, and in ways that are just frankly unnecessary and disgusting. These are the kinds of works that are almost always emerging from the minds of white writers and white directors. But this is a moment at which that style of work is being produced by a Black man that then has the audacity to market what he is doing as radical and as path-breaking. That to me is deeply pernicious as well. And if I could just say too, it feels like and I deeply mean this. If there were white supremacists in that theater, and I do not mean this in a conjecture way. I mean the lynching kind, the hooded kind, the Klansman kind, they would have the time of their lives watching that play. We as Black people are in pain watching it, right? I'm watching it through my fingers. And so I think if this achieves anything, what it does do is expose the degree to which the kind of white liberal and white supremacist are finding opportunities to create space for and condone similar things. Being in that room felt like a complete mask off moment. If you people find this funny, if you are enjoying it in this way, what are you saying behind closed doors? What are you able to justify to yourself? What policies are you able to justify to yourself when no one else is watching? These are the kinds of questions that I found myself asking while in there.
All right, Elle, last word to you here. Got about a minute left here.
Oh, I was going to say too that, first of all, I do want to say that one of my former students was in the play playing Philippe Sebastian Hines. So, at least I got to see him perform. But I also think that there's not enough knowledge in Canada. So part of what's happening in Canada is a denial of our own history of slavery. And then we already project this fictional place of slavery onto the deep South, which is the real slavery and the real anti-Blackness. So not only do you have a liberal white audience, you have a liberal Canadian white audience that is already distancing itself from our own horrors and impacts of slavery, and then the afterlife of slavery as it impacts the lives of Black people, that they can then laugh at this thing that so many removes from them. And as Matt said, are white people in Toronto really familiar with this deep kind of history and language of slavery and this kind of depiction and, what you might need to even begin to make sense of it as the satire of slavery? So, it just reinforces this Canadian mythology that slavery is separate from us. Anti-Blackness is separate from us. Racial terror and Black violence is separate from us. So therefore, we can safely laugh and then pretend it's edgy. Meanwhile, Trump has sent the troops into D.C. and Chicago, Black cities. We've had a lynching of a Black man at university that was dismissed until Colin Kaepernick had to literally get an autopsy. In Toronto, we continue to see Black people killed by the police. We're at a time of rolling back DEI, like backlash to Black people, saying everything is DEI. Like we are in a time of increase of genocide globally in Palestine, in Congo, in South Sudan. This is what we as Black people are thinking about and dealing with and trying to bring in our daily lives. And where, frankly, you put your penis when you have sex, and it's very penis-centered sex, by the way. The play is also extremely lesbophobic, but that's another conversation. But, that where your genitalia is really the least of our concerns as Black people right now. And the idea that shallow idea of what matters in your relationship is somehow political. Like people can do whatever they want in their own relationship. Like go ahead and do it, but leave the rest of us out of it and go get therapy.
Mm-hmm. Leave the rest of us out of it and go get therapy is actually a really wonderful place to leave it. I really appreciate both of your time. This has been great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys. Elle Jones is a poet and assistant professor at the Department of Politics at Mount St. Vincent University in Halifax. She was going to be in Toronto for this conversation. She was back in Halifax. Matt Amha is a writer and culture critic based in Toronto. And Slave Play runs until October 26th at the Berkeley Street Theatre here in Toronto.